Well, thanks for joining us. A post-lunch chat about the 7 keys to Doomsday. Largely, of course, that's what brings us together. But I think we should start our talk in 1969, if we could, because of course that was your first appearance in Doctor Who, Trevor. Charlie, your mum, of course, Wendy Padbury, was starring with Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines at the time. Mm-hmm. And Terrance, the year of your first Doctor Who tale that you authored with Malcolm Hulke, of course.
Yeah.
So, tell me about 1969. What were you doing at the time? You were waiting to take over Doctor Who, were you? Or tell me about that.
No, well, I think I probably was. I would say my time on Who is 68 to 74 was actually script editing, but I eventually arrived to replace Derek Sherwin, who got another job, and then he didn't get it.
Okay.
So he kind of hung around, and I trailed him for about a year. So I probably didn't fully take over till about 69.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what shape did you find the show in?
Diabolical, chaotic.
Say what you mean. In what way? In what way?
Well, it's largely due to the fact that my predecessor as a script editor and producer spent a good deal more time in the BBC bar than they did in their office. So and you know, I used to go with them, and you know, about I think I was half drunk for about my first 6 months on Doctor Who. And in my innocence, I thought that's how you make television programmes. But it's not.
Really?
It really isn't. And they were in their script situation was diabolical, it really was. So, hence the War Games, if anybody remembers that. Derek Sherwin came into my office one day and said, Terrance, we need a 10-part Doctor Who, you've got to write it, and we need it in 2 weeks' time. Because 2 of their projects, the 6 and the 4, collapsed. And they come up with the brilliant idea of having a 10-part Doctor Who and having me do it, so I knew I'd never do it in the time, so I called him Mac Hulke, and we did the War Games together. But that should never have happened in the first place. I'm just giving it as an example of how bad things were.
And what about yourself, Charlie? Obviously, your mum was Doctor Who star of the time. You've seen all our episodes since?
Yes, I have.
In that case, let me ask you. No.
All of them.
Some of them? Any of them?
Yes, of course. For her very first Doctor Who convention, actually, I think was the first time that I saw them, because she said, I've got to do something called a Doctor Who convention. I have no idea what that is. And I need to now watch all my episodes so I know what the hell I did, so I can answer questions on it. And that's when I first saw Mum in Doctor Who, I think, when I was about, I don't know, but that would have been in the early 90s, I think. Mm-hmm. So I hadn't really seen her in anything up until then, and then spent a lot of time going, how the hell are you throwing that monster over your shoulder, and why are the sets wobbling so much, and what the hell is this show? And that's where the sort of fascination started, really.
So if your first experience of that was at a Doctor Who convention, you must have been even more struck by the fact that these conventions take place at all. Where was that?
Well,
Tell me about that.
I didn't go to that first.
Oh, beg your pardon.
No, I didn't go to that first. That was Mum preparing.
Oh, I see.
But I had been. I hadn't really known. Well, yeah, I didn't really know what Mum did for a living. I don't know why. It was very confusing. I spent a lot of time knowing that she went off to London to do things and didn't really. Yeah, it wasn't until I'd sort of had been to a couple of conventions and met people, and they said, "Oh, it's Wendy," and I'd gone, "What? Why is everyone so excited about Mum?" And Mum said, "Oh, people know me from that." And I was like, "Oh, they actually, people have seen this show that you're in. Oh, I see." And I think that's where I sort of learnt that she was actually quite good, and people actually knew who she was. It was very confusing, but yeah.
And we're talking about the War Games there with Terrance, Trevor. You obviously, that was your first appearance connected with Doctor Who in the War Games with Patrick Troughton.
Yes.
What do you remember of that? You were a Time Lord responsible for his regeneration.
That's right, I got rid of him.
Yes, you did, yes. Very successfully.
Yeah, well, if you're going to get rid of somebody, you get rid of them. That's my theory. I knew Patrick Troughton quite well.
Oh, yes.
Because I'd been on the BBC drama ramp for about, off and on for about 10 years. And so had he.
Oh, okay.
Until he went into Doctor Who, actually. So I knew him very well from ordinary broadcasts. So it was, like, all right, mate, here you go. And got rid of him down a drain or so, down a well.
That's right, yes, yes.
Down a well, yes.
Terrance is writing there.
Yes. You wrote him down the well, didn't you?
What?
You wrote...
Patrick Troughton's demise.
Yes, when Troughton goes, we got rid of Troughton.
Yes, yes.
He went down the well.
Yes.
And he came out as...
Some chap called Jon Pertwee.
That's right, that's the one.
Now, which of course is the time on the show that Terrance took over with Barry Letts and Jon Pertwee. Tell me about that, Terrance, because you said you took the show over at a chaotic time. How did you turn that ship around?
Well, very slowly and with great difficulty, but the root of the problem, as it is with everything, I think, and certainly in television, is scripts. And I once attended a giant BBC meeting chaired by Hugh Weldon, which they were going into the fact that why were so many BBC shows overrunning or, going into extra time or whatever. And the answer in every case came down to late scripts. That's the one thing. Because at a certain time in television, a director joins with a large and expensive entourage of people with him. And if they've got no scripts, they can't do anything. They can't start work, So that's the root of the problem, is late scripts. And what I really kind of said about tackling that, people don't realise how hard it is to get in a good set of scripts for a show, especially. And we were doing 4 or 5 serials a season, which we were a series of serials, which is weird. And it just takes a long time. And thing is, writers are devious, unreliable, treacherous bastards, as I know, being one myself. And I used to say to people, don't come up with the excuses to me, I've used them all myself in my time. But you need to get in good time, and you need to look after the writer and keep him up to the mark and see the scripts are delivered and get on the phone to him if they're not, and generally nurse the whole thing through. And that was the beginning of it, really, when we started getting decent scripts in on time, and then other things, flow easier after that. It's never easy, because television production is a really difficult thing to do. It's difficult and complicated, and what can go wrong will. When Barry Letts was producer, he used to come into the office and say, all right, tell me, what happened? What's the latest disaster of the day? There's always one. But, if you've got a decent set of scripts to go into the studio, then it makes your life so much easier. And everybody's.
And of course, it's not just getting a good script, it's the time how long that script runs. You've got to get that as well, haven't you?
No, you never actually know. You can't really time a script, before it's produced. It's only when it goes into, you don't know how fast the actors are going to talk, or what they're going to say or whatever. And so that's part of the script, part of my job as script editor, was to nurse each script through and confer with the director who'd say, sometimes they'd say it's a bit short and we need another scene. So you've got to write another scene using the same sets and characters, I used to do quarrel scenes myself. I was famous for my quarrel scenes. I'd had a couple of people have a blazing row for 2 minutes, and that filled the script up, But more often it runs too long. But I always used to say you can always cut, and it always improves, and I generally believe in that. Once I was at the rehearsal, and the director, Dougie Camfield, it was in Beaugest, and he said, this scene in the canteen is running too long, legionnaires chatting round the table, then our heroes. He said, can you take a minute or two out? So, that was easy enough, it was general chit-chat. So I took a couple of minutes out, and the director gave them out to the cast. And then somebody came up to me afterwards and said, one of the legionnaires came up and said, those 3 or 4 lines you cut? That was my part. And I thought, absolutely terrible, So I went back to them and said, I'm sorry, I've slipped up here slightly, you know, and I redid them and put most of his part back in. I think he got 3 of his 4 lines back, you know.
And at the time you helmed Doctor Who, of course, Barry Letts took over as producer and Jon Pertwee as the leading man. What are your main memories of Jon?
Well, Jon, what can you say about Jon? Jon, oh dear, I'll have to be careful. Jon was an actor. Jon was a very actorish actor, you know, and I know, my general belief about actors is that they're frightened children. Mm-hmm. Underneath, they've got tremendous. They're always good looking, of course. They have great charm of manner and social ease, and inside it all, they're absolutely bloody terrifying. and Jon was no exception. You had to look after Jon all the time, reassure him, tell him everything was okay, tell him you were pleased with him. You know, if you gave a slight frown going out of rehearsal, he was shattered for the day or something. You know, so it's really, you know, you really do have, you know, and I can understand it, you know, because if you send in a script and they don't like it, well, okay, you're at least one stage removed. If you don't like an actor or its performance, they don't like you know, you personally, and that must be very painful and very hard to cope with, you know. And, you know, I am, in spite of what I'm saying, I'm very fond of actors. I think they have you know, they contribute an enormous amount and they have a terribly difficult job, but you do have to look after them, you know. You do have
it's rather like football.
Yeah. Except perhaps not as well paid, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, I suppose they do get a bit more.
Yes.
Bit more than I did.
So how did you turn that ship around then of Doctor Who? How long did it take you to get the format of the show as you wanted it?
Well, probably a couple of years at least, you know, because there was the whole question of the exile to Earth, you see, which is a mistake, because Doctor Who exiled to Earth isn't Doctor Who anymore, you know, he's Quatermass or something like that. So the first thing we wanted to do was get him up and about, you know, going around the universe in the TARDIS. And what we did was we had the Time Lords use him as a sort of special agent. They'd scoop him up and dump him down on some other planet with a tricky situation, knowing he wouldn't be able to resist, you know, interfering in it.
007.
Yeah, absolutely. And we started off like that. And then gradually, in what was it, the 3 Doctors, he redeemed himself and saves the Time Lords and Gallifrey, and they give him the the power to use the TARDIS back. So took us a while, took us a year or 2.
And towards the end of your time as script editor of Doctor Who, of course, the Doctor Who stage play that Trevor starred in was mooted. How did that come about? It had been on the cards for quite a few years, hadn't it?
This is the first one, isn't it? Because there were 2.
The 7 Keys to Doomsday.
7 Keys.
7 Keys to Doomsday, yeah. Well, no, the producers came to the office and asked me to do it, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Pygeri and somebody else.
Yes,
you know.
I can't remember his other
No,
one.
I can't remember the other one either. But, you know, that was a carry-on. I mean, the producers were young and inexperienced and keen, enthusiastic.
Yeah,
and
they'd never done that sort of thing
Never
before.
done it before. They spent so much money on the production,
They
they
lost
had
their
no
houses.
chance whatsoever of ever making a profit. And they made the set so big they wouldn't go on the lorries for touring, I remember that. But we had a tremendous open night, rave reviews everywhere, and good crowds to begin with. And then the IRA got going with the bombing campaign.
You could hear them going off.
Really?
Yeah.
People did not want to take their kids into the West End. So
Can't blame them.
I always say it was a flop d'estime, that first one.
Yeah.
And were you responsible in any way for Trevor's casting, or how did that
No,
go?
the writers don't cast.
Oh, okay.
Directors cast.
Was there ever any thought of Jon Pertwee being in it?
Well, Jon couldn't, you see, because of the commitment to the show.
Okay.
He wasn't able to do it. Well, but Jon was in the second one, you know, what was it,
The Ultimate Adventure.
Ultimate Adventure. Jon was then free to do that, you see, because he retired. But we got Trevor, who did an excellent job. Excellent job.
And tell me about the casting. Tell me about when you first heard about the role and how you came to be Doctor Who.
Yes.
Or not.
Yes, no. Yes, I'm just trying to get things in the right order, yeah. The director, who had been a director at Swan in Worcester, I think, was also a technical man, which is probably why he got the job of directing this, because he was a lighting expert.
Little Cockney bloke, wasn't he? Very bouncy and cheery.
His name escapes me.
Yeah.
But he was a lighting expert. He did an awful lot of West End shows. But anyway, I don't know how he got hold of my name, but he rang me up and asked me if I'd go along. And I had a casting session in a pub. And this is the sort of casting session that doesn't happen to me very often. But I enjoyed this one.
Very good.
And after we'd had about 2 or 3 pints, I got the job.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So that was good. And we rehearsed the whole thing, and it was fine. And what really sticks out in my mind is when we come to the technical. Now, with a theatre, when you're putting on a show, you start off with technical rehearsals, just to, as their word suggests, to get all the technical lighting, props and stuff to match up with what you've been rehearsing. Usually, most shows have about 3 days tack. Then you have perhaps 3 days of, what do they call them?
Previews.
Previews. And then you get the pressing. So that's how that was. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday we were doing the then we had Thursday, Friday, Saturday previews, and Monday we had the pressing. We started on Monday. We had the first thing to do was to change Dr. Pertwee into Dr. Martin.
Of course. Now tell me about that, because that's quite a coup for the show.
So, you could do it very easily nowadays with all the technical ability that is at hand. But in those days it was a bit trickier. So they got 2 24-shot carousels interchanged on a screen, shooting his face, my face, his face, his face, his face, my face, his face, his face, my face, then my face and his face, and my face, and so on, until suddenly it became one, and then it was sort of on at the same time, and then his went out and 9 was left. Now, that sounds difficult, but you think, okay, well, we'll do that. After 3 hours on the Monday, I said, look, I haven't said a word yet. I mean, nobody's said anything yet. And we've only just got here. But they said, well, we've got to do it. So we did. And we went on like that. We cancelled the previews on the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday. We finished the tech at 10:30 on the Saturday night. And the management said, right, fine, back on Monday and we'll open for the press. And I said, this boy won't. I'm sorry, I can't remember what we did Monday. So they called everybody in on Sunday, and we did a full day rehearsal, retech rehearsal on the Sunday. Must have hurt a few people, but I couldn't have gone in front of the public, not knowing what the hell I was going to do next.
Sure.
And as Dave says, it worked, because it did go down very well on the Monday night. And we were all set for quite a long. It was a wonderful scheme. It would have changed my life, I think, because the idea was that we would do it over the Christmas to, I think, perhaps the end of January, and then they had a whole tour mapped out, already booked. We would go round there, and we'd end up in Blackpool for the summer, and do a summer season in Blackpool while we were rehearsing the next play to come back into London.
Oh, okay.
And God knows what would have happened. But as has been remarked, when London blew up and the whole thing collapsed, they had to rejig and they, of course, you then had to pick up dates where you could get them, and they were so scattered. You'd be Sunderland, Cardiff, Glasgow and Brighton, and we had 2 Pantechnicon lorries, big, big stuff, to take this vast scenery. And the cost of the diesel from all these places was such that they would never, ever have been able to cover their costs.
What a shame that it didn't.
So,
go
and
further.
they tried desperately to get something sorted out. We got to a point where we'd already signed contracts with a proviso. And if we got to Saturday noon, if we hadn't heard by then, we were, and then it was cancelled, we would have to be paid for the contract. It got to, I think it was 10:30 or 11 on Saturday morning when the phone went. So we went down the booze and drank off the process.
But you had a good 4 weeks in London at the Adelphi Theatre.
Oh yeah, enjoyed that. Yeah.
And with, of course, as your companion, Charlie's mum,
Yeah.
Wendy Peppery.
Yes, that was lovely. That was a nice friendship. So, and of course, when I went to Stratford, I met up with her and her husband, and I'd met him on some other shows as well, and we had, it was great fun. Yeah.
And Terrance, were you at rehearsals? You were presumably at the opening night?
Yeah,
What sort of process did
with
you go
the
through?
theatre, they want you there all the time.
Okay.
All the time. And, actors, of course, will come up saying, I'm not quite happy with this line, could you do so-and-so? So you try and sort that out for them, and, you are treated a lot better in the theatre than you are in television. In television, you want the writer to deliver a workable script and piss off and get out your way, while you get on with making the show. In the theatre, he's there all the time as a central figure, so that was quite nice.
And what consideration did you give to writing a stage play as opposed to a television script?
Well, the thing that really struck me when I was first writing it is that in the theatre, you can't cut. The theatre is all in long shot. They're all right over there. And you just got to make everything bigger and clearer and more distinct, and show people what's going to happen.
And tell me about the first night, because presumably that was quite a proud moment.
Yes, it was. Well, yes and no. I saw at the first visit of the show, there's a scene where there's a lot of dry ice. And they put in so much dry ice that the audience totally disappeared.
Yes.
Dry ice above their heads, And the second thing was that my middle son, who was about, 4 or 5 at that time, and he'd been quite happy with Daleks on the television screen in a little box. But Daleks on the stage where they could come out and get him, that was not the same thing at all. So he got the screaming abdabs. And I had to take him home in a taxi, hand him over to the babysitter, get the taxi back to the theatre, and thereby miss most of my own personal.
Oh, that's a shame.
But there you are. Well, I saw it many a night after that. Yeah.
Well, and of course got the chance to adapt it for Big Finish some years later in 2008.
Yeah, I mean that's a business, you see. I mean, as I say, in the theatre you show people things, They're some way away, so you've got to, they're in long shot, as I say, so you've got to make it big enough. In audio, you can't show them anything, they can't see it. So other people have got to tell them, you've got to tell them what's happening. So, the hero says to the heroine, you duck behind the scenery, and I'll tell you what's happening. All the Cybermen are coming in, or whatever. And it's, but you know, we got through it somehow.
And of course, in the audio remake, you took your mum's part, if you don't mind using that phrase. Was she, how pleased was she that you'd stolen her role?
Furious. Actually,
You're still speaking, yeah?
We're not, no, it's tough. No, actually, so I got the job. And
Well, Big Finish before, hadn't you?
I'd done Big Finish parts before, yeah, but I got the job and then did it, but totally forgot to tell Mum about it. Yeah, right. Really forgot. Don't know why that didn't even occur to me. And then it wasn't until I think she went to a Doctor Who convention. And somebody said, "Oh, how do you feel about the fact that your daughter stole your part?" And she said, "What?" And that's true. I actually totally forgot to tell her about it. So yeah, she was furious, outraged, shocked, and appalled. No, she was thrilled. I mean, she was absolutely thrilled. And but it's it's quite fun to steal work from your mother, isn't it? It's slightly offensive, but yeah, really fun. I think it's yeah.
And so you've been a Doctor Who girl as well, to Trevor's Doctor.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was delighted when
absolutely.
when we met up.
Yeah, I mean, and Mum loved doing that show as well, and I think, it just sounded like great fun. I did speak to her the other day and said that I was coming along to this, and said, I don't know anything about the stage show. I wasn't born, so I don't know anything about it other than we used to have a plaque. Is it right that there was a plaque made up of on a wooden block?
Each one of us got a plaque.
We had that in our bathroom all through my childhood. It was of the sort of.
It was like a gravestone
block.
actually, which was probably very appropriate. And it was brass.
Yeah.
And it was, all the time, and we would have got the other chap's name on that.
It was like, that's true. That's right. Maybe I shouldn't. I think it was like the poster almost, but just the names and the show and the dates of the show and all the people involved, but sort of engraved on this thing. So I did know what it was when I did it, but I think that had always been in there.
Yeah. It's very handy for keeping doors open or shut.
Either way, I think.
But I don't know where mine is. It's in the house somewhere because I never throw anything away.
Yeah.
And you'd previously worked for Big Finish as well, hadn't you, Trevor? Yeah. But how was it to recreate the 7 Keys to Doomsday a couple of weeks after its original theatre run? How many, was it 34 years later, something like that?
Something like that. Well, actually, it was quite alarming.
In what way?
Well, I thought to myself, I can kid people that it was great what I did 34 years ago because they never saw it. But now they're going to find out. And I don't know, I just tried my best. But that's it.
And did you, what sort of consideration did you, both for the audio version and the stage version, give to playing the character of the Doctor? Because you played perhaps an older version than Jon Pertwee had, perhaps in a more sort of William Hartnell-esque fashion?
Yes, more towards that, yeah.
Why was that? Why did you make that choice? Was it script or?
I'm just trying to think that. Well, I suppose it wasn't that. Well, now, of course, from my age at the moment, I feel that at the time I was a youngster, but of course, when I did it, I wasn't in other people's eyes a youngster, and I suppose I felt more of a father figure at the time. That's what I was trying to get. Of course, I would be a grandfather figure now. That's what was worrying me about doing the audio.
In what way?
Well, I was pushing it a bit from the point of view. Yes, I was. When did we do it?
Well, I think it was about.
It was 2008.
2008.
The audio.
Yeah,
Yes.
There you go. We thought it was just over 5 years. Yeah, well, gosh.
Yes, well, anyway, I'd certainly picked up my freedom pass, by some measure of years. So I was a bit worried that I would be, right, I'm trying to think of an example of you get some of these Hollywood stars like, John Wayne of Holy Name and all the rest of it. But the idea of him having a fist fight at the age of 68 or something and throwing people all over the bar.
I see. So
when you look at it and you think, yes, man, that's you've just been down the gym, haven't you? and I thought I didn't really. Well, of course you couldn't see me.
Well, yes, absolutely.
So that was one blessing, but I just hoped I wouldn't sound quite as old as I have.
No, it sounded perfectly, absolutely terrific for that genre. You didn't ever thought that at all, because it was quite an action-packed story that you've written, wasn't it, Terrance? You had the Clawrantulas, the main villains, and along with the Daleks.
That claw that came out and grabbed me.
Yeah.
That.
I don't remember it.
Well, you wouldn't. Yeah, you just wrote the darn thing. Sort of this claw comes out of nowhere behind the backdrop, and I'm walking along for some reason along this corridor. Who knows what's at the end of the corridor? And suddenly, out of the side of the corridor, boom, and grabs me round the waist, and it was sore. But that was another example of difficult timing at
the effects, technically
speaking.
And what are your main memories of recreating it for audio then? What were your main pleasures about doing that? Because it must be nice to have it, actually a record of it, rather than something that's quite transient like a theatre play.
Yeah. Stealing work from Mum, we've covered. One of them, other than it's always lovely to do a big finished job, and they're always so nice, and Mum had always spoken so fondly of you anyway, and so it was lovely to get to work with you. But I was quite excited because I got to do the voice of a Dalek, and I didn't know I was going to be doing that until the day. And I listened to it back the other day, and I do a fairly spectacularly bad job of it, but for me, I was quite happy with it. I'm quite happy to get the chance to do my Dalek speaking, but it's a really good story. I mean, they so are, and it carries. And obviously, I didn't see the stage show, but it carries. It holds up, and it's engaging, and it's still really exciting to listen to. And whatever you sort of saying about that, sort of maybe you were a father figure before and a grandfather figure now, actually didn't really impact the sort of humour of the piece, or it didn't feel like there was any specific dynamics in that respect. It was just a good bit of action, kind of good sort of fun.
It's good to have it on disc now or downloadable. That there's a record of something that happened a few decades ago now. So it's great you got to do that.
Yeah.
Shall we have some questions from the floor? I think we've got any
There's
questions
one
for
right
our panel just there.
Oh, sweet.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Oh, I won't have my sweet there. Yes.
When I was about 13, I remember watching Our Mother in the Crotons, and I absolutely fell in love with her. A very beautiful woman.
Dad?
You're married, are you?
Well, no, I'm not. What's the second part of
We'll
the
speak later. Terrance, why didn't Terry Nation write was he asked to write the Dalek story, the 7 Keys to Doomsday, at all?
Why didn't Terry do it?
Yeah.
Well, they asked me.
That's fair enough.
But there was some kind of deal where Nation would always get first option on something because it featured the Daleks.
He might have been too busy on other things, actually.
He was around.
Terry went into film production and all kinds of things, so he probably was too busy.
But he did turn up. He did turn up, didn't he, on occasion?
No, he's not with us now, no. Sorry, was that...
He did turn up to rehearsals,
Did
you
you turn
mean?
up to actually rehearse?
No, yes he did, yeah. I remember as one of my things about Terry, he came to one or two meetings in the early days when we were discussing it, and he said to me after one of the meetings, I'm not too happy about one or two of the things that went on in the meeting. Could we have a chat about it? You see? And I said yes, any time, Terry. and we were walking down Piccadilly, and I said, well, now if you like. And he said, well, we're just passing the Ritz, let's go in and have a champagne cocktail and talk it over that. And I said, I like working with you, Ted. You've got style.
Sorry, Terrance, there was one more question I had, actually. I know from watching the DVD commentaries, it seems now that you wrote most of the Monster Paladon, and you wrote a great deal of the Seeds of Death. I wonder how much of Planet of the Daleks you ended up writing.
As much as was necessary is all I could say, sometimes I rewrote bits of most people at one time or another, but not, out of desire to grab it, but simply that, the production needed some sort of cut or change or adaptation. And that was my job as script editor to do it, but I would try and, get the script right before we got into studio, I remember the department of the BBC that's concerned with written off scripts, phoned me up and said, could you give us a list of your latest write-offs? We don't seem to have had anything from you. And I said, we don't do write-offs on Doctor Who, I said, proudly. And we didn't, I felt that if I had commissioned the script, it was my responsibility to make it work, and if it didn't work, it was my job to fix it, so we never actually abandoned one or paid the writer off and didn't do it. There you are.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody else? Oh, gentleman over there.
Somebody right over there, yeah.
I've got a question for Trevor, but I've got a comment for Terrance, or rather, it's a thank you for all your work over the years. Your target books were the texts of my childhood, and I remember the epilogue to Pyramids of Mars till the day I die. It's 30 years since I read it now. I can still see it in my head. It helped that I sat on a wasp the same day, so there's kind of a pain is linked to it. But your target books were very, very important to me. I'm sure to a lot of us in the room, so I'd like to thank you for that. Trevor, would you like to have been cast in the role of the Doctor for television? And if you had, what would you have done?
Well, that's it. Well, there was a moment when it did cross my mind, because it was at the end of Pertwee's stint, and Tom Baker came to see the show, and I knew that he was then going to be the take over. It had fleetingly crossed my mind, knowing that that Pertwee was going, wondering who was going to be asked, and wondered whether I might. But then I thought, well, I won't be, because we're intending to take this on this tour. So it was, I thought, well, it's going to be him. So I dismissed it. It was, I don't know that I would have liked to be all the time. Perhaps, I can't say, because when you get missed opportunities, it's best not to consider what might have been. You get out there and say, well, it didn't happen, let's get on with the next job. It's no good living on what might have been. And so I never thought about that after that little period. So I don't know how I would approach it. Probably I would have tried to carry on with the character that I produced in this one. But I hadn't thought up gimmicks. There were a series of doctors who brought their own, or were invented who had a series of gimmicky characters. And I hadn't really sat down and thought out what sort of a gimmicky character I was going to be. I just sort of tried to play him as a benevolent sort of father figure trying to get people sorted out. like a doctor. And I wasn't thinking of wearing long scarves or funny hats and I thought, well, you can't really outdo that wonderful car that Pertwee had. So I didn't think of anything like that. And of course, when you're doing it on the stage, you're given the play. You're not in a television series. If you're going to play the Doctor over several, you've got to establish a character of a Doctor who will go into all these different things. Here we have a play, and it's the story of the play from the beginning to the end, and you've got to tell that story as the writer has written it to get it across to the audience. And you don't sort of spend your time thinking, shall I wear a fancy bow tie that goes round in circles? You try and get on with the job. That's all I can think of as far as that's concerned.
Thank you.
It's a piece, isn't it? You talk about a play as the piece.
Yes.
And it's one thing.
Yeah, it's not my...
Yeah.
It's not my bit,
Well,
it's our bit.
Yeah, all of us.
Any other questions from the floor?
I just did a bit of Googling while you were talking earlier, and your director on Seven Keys to Doomsday was Mick Jackson.
Yeah.
And it says he was a very highly acclaimed lighting designer,
Yes.
as you said. And then the designer of the actual sets was John Napier,
That's
who
right.
went on to do Cats, Les Miserables, Miss Saigon. So he was very prolific. As you said, it was a very elaborate set.
Yeah, and I came to work with the director later, in fact, the next year, I think it was, I got it, why he picked on me. It was because I had played at Chichester Festival in the summer of '74, and he had done all the lighting for Chichester at that time, and he somehow sort of thought that chap seems to be right for the part. That's how it came about. Thank you for sorting that out in my head. You get a bit confused when you go back 42 years.
Any more? Any other questions from the floor before we finish? Sir. Thank you.
Trevor, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that you played Christopher Isherwood in a play, which is something you have in common with recent Dr. Matt Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Wonder how that came about.
Oh, well, that was... I belong to that generation of actors who learnt their trade in rep. We used to do a different play every week, and that was one of them. And I had to learn Christopher Isherwood. I can't remember what the play was I was doing in the evening, but in the daytime I was learning Isherwood, and I did it for a week. That's all I did. As far as it was the original before they did the cabaret. It was based on the play I Am a Camera, which was written by Christopher Isherwood, who, well, that's really that's it as far as I can think of an experience.
Any other questions? Any last questions on the floor? Thank you very much. In which case, just to finish off, how does the experience of the Seven Keys to Doomsday, how do you feel about it now? How do you look back on it now? Starting with yourself, Terrance.
Not very much, I'm afraid, because it was so long ago, you know. And of course there was the second one, which was a very different story, because that was taken on by a producer who was very experienced in doing low-budget shows, you know, or he kept the budget under control. And we actually did tour with that. They did do a tour. You know,
did they?
First with Jon Pertwee, and then John found it too tiring and Colin Baker took over for a while. So that's, if anything, is special in my mind, you know. I mean, I remember a few things like the first night and the dry ice and all that kind of thing, you know, but not so much now in any detail, to be honest.
Sure. And what about yourself, Charlie and Trevor? The audio version obviously must be fresher in your mind, Trevor.
Yes, well, it certainly brought a lot of the stage memories back that had been sort of drifting away. And when I got your audio script, and I thought, don't remember saying that. Oh, perhaps I didn't say that. And then, oh yes, I remember that. Oh, that's where it happened, and things like that.
Sure.
And yeah, it brought back some very happy memories. I remember we decided to have a party at my flat, and it was to celebrate either going on tour or commiserating, because we're not going on tour.
Sure.
And I remember we all got in there, and there weren't enough seats or anything, so everybody sat round on the floor, and it was my job to go round sort of pouring wine, and I'm thinking, oh, it's the second case of wine. How many more cases of wine? I don't know. But we all got away in the end.
Very good. And last word then to you, Charlie.
Oh gosh.
Thoughts looking back on the Seven Keys audio?
Well, I suppose wanting to put my own stamp on it is kind of a. It was sort of easy to do because I didn't know what I was comparing to, other than vocally, because Mum's voice was so high and it was so sort of in that, you know, that it was, she sounded so incredibly high pitched and young and actually incredibly of the time. You know, it was a different. So I feel like this felt more modern anyway than what the stage play would have been, just from knowing how Mum's voice sounded. So I knew it was going to be different, that I wasn't going to be competing in that sense to try and do a better job, but just my own take, I suppose. And I think yeah, that's my sort of experience of it. But she said, when I asked her the other day what she liked, was she loved doing the play. She had an amazing time doing the play, but she did particularly enjoy the opening scene of waiting in the auditorium.
Oh, yes.
She thought that was really exciting, night on night, because she said that she used to get some people either telling you guys to shush when you were speaking in the opening scene, and then the audacity of you both going on stage. And when she said when that worked, that was really exciting, but to sit there amongst the audience with them not knowing felt like a really well-kept secret for a few minutes, and it was really enjoyable.
Well, thank you so much for coming up. It's been great to reflect on the show with you. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie, Terrance and Trevor.